Okay, girl. So I ask all of my guests this, girl, but how did you get your guy?
So I'm going to be fully transparent and honest and open, right?
Please do.
I got my guy by getting my shit together first,
What did that look like?
right?
Yeah.
And for me, that looks like giving myself the commitment that I was out here searching for someone else to give me and
Mm,
wondering why the men that I chose, they were with me, but they weren't committing to the level that I wanted them to commit to. And then I recognized, ma'am, you're not even committing to yourself. You said you're not going to call him anymore. You said you're not going to go back anymore. You said you're
mm,
not getting back into his bed, but you did, and you did. So I was breaking my own commitments to myself. And I realized I need to commit to myself in a way I've never committed to myself before. And I made a promise to myself, like I said earlier, to only make choices that were moving me in the direction of what I wanted. And I had a moment where I realized if I am able to be monogamous and honest and committed and all of these things, then universal law says there is an equal to that.
right.
And so at some point, I would be able to bring in and meet this man. And I will tell you the honest truth, Anwar. 7 days later, I met the man who is now my husband and I've been married to for almost 11 years. We didn't get married 7 days later, but I met him 7 days later. I was coming from a closure lunch with somebody's son who didn't deserve my time anyway.
Not a closure lunch, girl. Not a closure lunch.
Extra.
I'm living, girl. I'm living because that's the same shit I would have done. I'm like, no, we got to do this.
Yes.
Period. Okay. I'm listening.
And he showed up to the closure lunch,
Of
right?
course he
Like,
did. Of
okay.
course he did.
Right. And so we were there. And while I'm sitting there, I realized like I was having an internal conversation like, you are really playing yourself.
Mm,
Why are you here? And who were you that this is the man that you once chose? And in that space and over that lunch table, I had an epiphany about my own value and self worth. And I said, you know what? I'm completely done with this. This is not what I want into my life. I uninvite this energy, this person, these experiences from my space. And I got up from that table and I said, you know what? Like, have a great life. And I walked off. And 15 minutes later, my husband approached me, like literally. It took us, um, so we met in October. It took us about 3 months before we went on our first date.
what were we doing in those 3 months?
We were talking, we were getting to know each other. We were overcoming our egos.
Girl, what does that mean, girl? Because I think we got a lot of egos up in here listening that need to overcome their egos.
Yeah. So in the midst of the heartbreak, you're like, I'm gonna do better. I'm gonna be better. I'm gonna be this
Mm-hmm.
type of person. And then after a couple weeks, your heart doesn't break anymore, and the old self wants to come back. And those
Mm-hmm.
old habits, right? And those old voices start to show up. And as I said before, I was overcompensating because I was coming from a place of trauma. So I carried myself in a very guarded, sort of conceited, uppity kind of way when it came
Got
to
it.
like
Mm-hmm.
earn me, but not from a genuine earnest place.
Right.
And so my husband was used to being catered to by the women in his life. And
Mm.
so I was like, well, that ain't me. So you have to work harder. And we were both in those spaces of ego, like
Mm-hmm.
what you got from me, as opposed to here's what I can offer you.
Right.
And it took us some time to do that. And even our story, like we stopped talking and I was like, I don't like him. And then I have a really good friend. My husband's name is Jason. I have a really great friend named Jason who we grew up with, who does everybody's hair. And I was like, my aunt was like, oh, I want a ponytail. Can you call Jason? And I'm like, oh, let me call Jason. And I called husband Jason instead of hair Jason.
Yes, God. And I
Yes,
really mean that. Yes,
yes,
God.
yes. And it was like, and I'm like, oh my God, how are you? This was an accident, but I'll call you back later tonight. And he was like, an accident, okay. And I'm like, I'll call you back later tonight. And so the time went, and the night came, and I thought about it because I had really liked him in the beginning, and we had great conversations. And I thought about it, and this is absolutely true. I said, all right, I'm gonna call him, and I picked up the phone to call him, And then my ego kicked in and I'm like, no, I'm not going to call him. And I put the phone down and the phone rang and it was him.
Girl, I'm gagging over here, girl. Stop.
And that was it. And now this is what, like 17 years later, 2 kids later, almost 11 years of marriage, businesses together, all of that. So the moral to the story is get over yourself
Yes, yes.
and allow yourself to be open to the possibility of something new.